Right. Welcome back. It is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. It's about 4 in the afternoon, and today we're going to talk about saving money by sanding out and buffing out imperfections in your paint job that either you painted yourself or paid somebody to do it. Most call it wet sanding and buffing. Some call it cut and polish. Some call it cut and buff. Some call it flat and polish, but essentially it's the same thing. There's a lot of different techniques to achieve the showroom shine that you're going after. Lately, in recent years, there's been a lot of new methods that are coming around, but I still kind of do things the old way, and it still works just fine. So let's say, for example, you picked up your car from a painter, or you painted it yourself, and you notice that you have some imperfections, either some bugs or some dirt, lint, hair, just little imperfections, scattered on the clear coat, mainly the flat panels, which are going to accumulate the most. Flat meaning hood, roof, trunk, and you want to get that out. Say maybe the paint shop or painter gave the car to you, returned the car like that, maybe thinking you wouldn't notice. I've had that happen to me. Or sometimes, maybe that's not included in the price. I think to wet sand and buff or wet sand and polish out an entire vehicle, top to bottom, you're looking at between 30 and 40 hours of work. Factor in, $50 to $50 an hour and up, and we're getting kind of expensive. We're getting $1,500 to $3,000 to wet sand and polish a car. I'm going to show you how to do that using some basic techniques and achieving essentially the same results. So the piece that we're going to be working on is the hood for the 60. But first I'm going to show you the products that I use and why I use them and how I use them. Let me show you over at the table here. All right, so this is what we have. This is what we're going to sand with. I have a fest tool that I bought, which is a Denibbing, which is essentially the same thing as a razor blade. So you can use a razor blade, but I bought this instead. I have some 3M 1000 grit sandpaper, wet or dry. 3M 1500, wet or dry. 3M 2000, wet or dry. 3M 3000, wet or dry. I have a piece of a Durablock that I cut down. I'm going to be using that with 1000 grit, and I have this old block here that is kind of soft on one side and a little more firm on the other side. I believe this is a Motor Guard. They sell them on eBay. And a squirt bottle, dollar store squirt bottle with just straight water. These are the items you're going to need to achieve that showroom shine. Now, like I say, there's different techniques, there's different methods, there's all kinds of different sandpapers under the sun. But we're going to do it by hand with these 3M papers here. You buy a sleeve of this stuff and it's enough to last you a very long time, a few cars at least. So let me show you the imperfections that we're going to be working on the 60 Impala convertible hood. All right, so this piece right here, we painted this back in Labor Day, I believe Labor Day weekend of 2023. The rain is picking up right now. Hopefully it doesn't get too loud. You guys can hear what I'm saying. This hood was taken down to bare metal. It was epoxied. It was body worked. It was epoxied. Then it was poly primed. Block that down. Then one layer of regular build 2K primer. Knock that down. Then it was sealed. Then it was base coated. Then it was clear coated with 3 coats. And then it was sanded with, I believe, 600 grit. It might have been 800 grit. And then it was given 3 more coats of clear. So this has been sitting for essentially, I don't know, 9 months or so. It's plenty cured. It's rock hard. It's done. And we have nothing coming back yet. But we do have some imperfections. When I sprayed this, I sprayed it hanging vertically to get the least amount of trash landing on the panel. I've said that in my past videos. If you were to spray this flat in a garage setting like this, you're gonna have all kinds of things land on it because you have, 20 to 25 square feet of panel that things will land. I don't care what you see on the videos. I don't care what you see on Instagram. You're getting trash in your paint if you're spraying panels flat in your garage. I don't care what anybody says. If you hang them vertical, you have a better opportunity or a better chance to get a cleaner job, especially if you hang it the way your intake and your air is moving. On this, I said in the video before, I sprayed the backside towards the exhaust of the little paint room I have, and you can see we hardly have any trash. We do have really minor nibs that are probably not even going to show up. But what I like to do first is I circle them. Here's one. As you can see, we have some right here. We're just going to circle them all. You're looking at the reflection of the LED lights that I have hanging. And I'm going to have to cut y'all off, and then I'll come back once I get these all circled. But it takes a little bit of time to circle all these. And what we're going after a showroom shine, okay? We're going after something that we're going to be proud of, that we can show off. And people are going to say, man, you did that yourself. And we're not spending any money. We're spending time and a little bit of sandpaper. And as you can see, this thing, it doesn't have very much texture, which is kind of hard to achieve when you're spraying a vertical panel. But being that it was flow coated, it made things a lot easier, and it flowed out real nice. I would say this texture on here, I wouldn't even call it orange peel. I mean, this looks pretty good. This area right here looks good. We're not even gonna mess with this area. We're gonna denib that, but we're not gonna mess with anything down here. There's no need. We're not gonna mess with the edges right here. We're not gonna even mess with this area right here. We're not gonna mess with the edges right here. This has plenty of clear coat that we're not going to burn through. We're going to go up to about right here. I like to go about a finger's width when we sand. So I'm going to show you guys step by step. But you can see it has a pretty good finish on it, but we want to get it flat. So what we're going to do is I'm going to circle all these imperfections, and I'll bring you guys back here once I do that. Alright, so we've circled all our imperfections, mainly in the centerpiece right here. They're just little nibs, little dust nibs or whatever that might have landed on it. It's really minor, really minor. You can go straight to sandpaper on this, but I think from what I've learned, if you denib them first, it comes out a lot cleaner. So the denib, and I might have missed some, but if you miss them, then they're really, they're really small. So nobody is going to be coming up to your car looking at it like this, seeing if you miss an imperfection. Okay, we're trying to achieve something to be proud of. So with the fest tool, you want to keep the tool as flat as possible, and you want to scrape. That's it. Knocking it down. Now, depending on how it was sprayed, sometimes you have to start more coarse than a 1500, and that's when things get dangerous. You have to know how many coats of clear you have. I mean, if you really want it flat, you can start with 800 and work your way up and refine, after 800. The problem with that is if you don't know how much clear is on the car, you can burn through. Okay, so you got to know how much clear, and really the only way to know how much clear is if you were there when it was being sprayed. The painter is your friend, or you did it yourself. The body shop can tell you that they sprayed 4 or 5 coats, but I mean, if you weren't there seeing it take place, we gotta trust but verify. Okay, because it's really hard to tell the difference between 3 coats and 6 coats. You almost can't tell. Also, a thing to remember is whatever scratches that you're putting on the panel. By scratches I mean wet sanding scratches. Whatever scratches you put on, you have to remove. So we don't want to go too crazy sanding in areas where you can't get the polisher. Either it's going to be a DA polisher or it's going to be a rotary polisher. You know, or you can maybe get in there and do some by hand. But you don't want to introduce scratches anywhere where you can't polish them out. That's a no-no. You got to be able to access them. So that's why I thought this hood would be a good ideal test piece here. As you can see, we're just taking our time going around the panel. This is called denibbing. Okay, now on something that, you know, you really don't care about, maybe like a daily driver, commuter type car that you painted or something, you know, after this you can polish these denibs. Once the nib is removed, you can go straight to polishing. They look fine. They look even better outside. Everything else that you might see in here is going to knock down so easy with 1500. So that's it, it's denibbed. So now we're going to go over these areas right here with our 1000 grit. It's not going to take much. We're going to cut our 1000 grit to wrap around this little small block. We're going to use just straight up water in a spray bottle. Okay, another tech tip: you want to use a spray bottle. You don't want to use a bucket. You can use a bucket. I'm not saying that that's wrong. The problem with using a bucket, and I learned this the hard way. Finally, somebody with some experience told me what I was doing wrong. You see guys sand with the bucket. Is the bucket clean? Was the bucket brand new? What's in the water? If you're on well water, you might have something floating in the water. If you throw all your sandpapers in the bucket, you know you're supposed to soak your sandpapers. Throw all the grits in the bucket at the same time, or if you start out with 800 grit and you got your sandpaper in the bucket, and then we're done with 800, we're going to move to 1200 now. We're going to use the same water. Well, guess what? You got 800 grit particles floating in that water that your 1200 grit is going to pick up, and you think you're sanding 1200, and really all you're doing is reintroducing 800 grit scratches. If you don't change out that water, by the time you get to 3000 or maybe even 8000, you're going to be introducing straight line sanding scratches. And you're going to wonder how the hell this happened, because we took so much care and we cleaned everything before, you know, every step of the way, and well, you use the same bucket. So I don't bucket sand anymore. I use spray bottles. Spray bottles $1 at the dollar store, maybe $2 now. And spray and sand. No bucket, no dipping the bucket. None of that. Using the spray bottle technique is going to save you a lot of headache and a lot of frustration, and it doesn't cost any money. It costs $2 for a spray bottle. I like to use just straight up water. Some people want to use soap and water. That's totally fine. Like I say, there's a lot of different methods to achieve what we're trying to achieve. It's been done for decades. People do it their way. People do it whatever kind of way, and I'm showing you my way for free. So let me get the 1000 grit wrapped up, and we're gonna start knocking these little areas down with the 1000 grit. All right, I got my 1000 grit small piece wrapped around my little DuraBlock that I cut down just for this, and we sprayed it with water. So all we're gonna do is lightly go over the area that we denibbed. All we want to do is erase the Sharpie marker. So we're using the Sharpie marker as a guide coat. We want to erase the Sharpie marker and maybe go just a step further, a little bit past the point or the time that it's erased. That's going to ensure that it's flat. Okay, you can use a little piece of wood, you can use a little piece of acrylic, you can use anything to block it down. I mean, you can even use your finger, but I like using a block to ensure even sanding. And also the block, you know, gives you something to hold on to while you're sanding. Okay, it's real simple. It ain't costing no money other than a small piece of sandpaper. I've had that little sleeve of 1000 grit for months. Bought it at I believe Napa. Another thing to consider when doing this is the color of the vehicle. Okay, metallic colors are going to be more forgiving when it comes time to cut and buff than a black car or a red car. Solid colors are going to tell you the truth, also with your body work. But the metallic colors in the sun, you know, they can offer you a little bit of forgiveness. So we're just gonna, you can see how much water it takes. Not a lot. We're not making a huge mess. We don't need to use the water hose. You know, we don't need it all running down the floor and all that. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Same is going to apply whenever it comes time to buff this stuff. Okay. Like I say, remember, the more coarse of a scratch you introduce, the more time you have to spend to refine that scratch and polish it out. Okay, that's more time on the polisher. It's more time for, you know, opportunity to screw up, burn something, cause a dent, drop it. Yeah. This has 3 heavy coats of clear after being cleared. So essentially I believe I sprayed this with 3 coats of clear. We sanded it down, so we removed 1. That's 2 coats of clear, and then we added 3 more, I believe. So that's 5 coats of clear. We might have only, I have to go back and watch the video. I might have only sprayed 2 more after sanding it, so that would be 4 coats of clear. Solid full coats of clear. And like I say, this has been curing very long. I'm just finally getting around to, you know, kind of took a break on it for about a month of the car here. Kind of got a little exhausted with it. Had to step away for a minute, man. Spend some time doing some other things, man. Get your mind right. This paint and body stuff, this restoration stuff can be exhausting, man. Financially, mentally, physically. Now on camera, there's probably not going to be any noticeable difference between the final finish and what it looks like right now, which it doesn't look bad. If it didn't have these imperfections, these nibs, you know, I would feel comfortable putting this on the car as is. But we're going for that showroom shine. We're going for that indoor car show shine. We're going for that look that cars who place themselves in indoor car shows should look like. All for free. Like I say, to cut and buff an entire car, 30 to 40 hours, man. I've had guys that message me, you know, they get the car back from the painter and it looks a certain way and they wonder why. And I said, man, did you pay to buff them? Well, I thought I did. Well, it might have not been discussed. Or maybe they assume that you don't know what you're looking at. And you assume that, oh, it's shiny, looks good to me, but really, you know, it has a little blem here and this and that. Well, maybe they're assuming you don't know what you're looking at, because what I've learned is that the whole paint and body game is really about what you can get away with by fooling the eye of the person looking at it. You know, that's what it's about. Because if the person looking at it can't see it, well, then it ain't there. But maybe the person looking at it doesn't know what to look for, or doesn't know what they're looking at. So anyways, this camera's starting to heat up. I got to give it a break. I'm going to finish knocking all these down with 1000 grit. As you can see, the same piece. I haven't even changed. That's how long the 1000 grit will last on these nibs. Let me finish this 1000 grit. Let me let the camera cool off here, and I'll bring you guys back. Alright, so what I've done off camera is 1000 grit over all the areas that we nibbed. I dried that off, and I went over with the Sharpie real gently over the area that was sanded, and using that as a guide coat. You don't have to do that, but it just makes things a lot easier. Okay. Now what we're going to do is get our spray bottle, and we're going to go 1500 grit. I got the 1500 soaking in a cup. We're gonna 1500 grit over these spots only for starters, okay? Then we're gonna dry it off. We're gonna assess it. And then we're gonna 1500 the whole thing. So basically this is the first round of 1500 just as an insurance policy over those 1000 grit scratches, okay? Because 1000 grit scratches, you know, they can be kind of hard to remove sometimes. I know the compounds out there, some of them advertise they can you know, polish out or eliminate 1200 grit scratches. Man, you're gonna be working the paint a long time to remove a 1200 grit scratch. So right now all we're doing is gonna remove, you know, the little Sharpie scratch. We're gonna go a little bit past it. When I say past it, I mean past the point that it's erased. That way we know that we have removed the 1000 grit scratch. So you see, it took about 5 seconds to remove the Sharpie, and we're going to spend about 10 seconds after the Sharpie. Using the same block, the same Durablock. This is a piece cut off of a longer piece. So this block didn't cost any money. Let me show you. Cut it right off of this block. Made that block shorter. 2 blocks in one. There's different blocks you can use. Some people frown on Durablocks. They say it doesn't cut it flat. It's too soft. You know, that's up for debate. I agree with that. But sometimes, you know, you can overthink it. We don't want to overthink it. Durablocks work just fine. Just depends on what you're asking out of the block, you know. I don't think Durablock work as good as the Black Diamond, but Durablocks have their place in the toolbox for sure. So as we progress through the steps, you see I spent 5 seconds to remove the Sharpie and then another 10 on the area around it. So as we progress, you know, you want to spend more time with the grits to ensure that you're removing the previous grit. By doing so, your polishing stage has less work to do. Less work with the polisher is good. So I'm going to do this whole hood in the same process you just watched me do over the last 2 minutes. I'll do this whole hood and then I'll bring you guys back. Alright, so what I've done is I sanded out the 1000 grit with 1500. The imperfection is gone. Smooth to the touch. There may be a bit of residual. Really minor. We're getting real technical. But we're going to 1500 this whole thing now. The whole entire hood. As you notice, there's no water on the floor. We haven't even made a mess yet. There's no need to make a huge mess, and all you need is a spray bottle and the hand block. So I'm using the same 1500 grit, 3M. Like I say, I know this is old school for some people, but you know, I got it, so I'm going to use it. There's probably better products out there these days, but get good results with this stuff. Now we're going to switch to the motor guard. We're going to be using the hard side, which is this side, or this side. Do either one we want. And we've got the 1500 soaking. So what we're going to do now is, like I say, we're going to flatten this whole panel. I'm going to put some tape on the areas that we don't want to sand. I personally no longer need to do that, but I want to show that for demonstration purposes. So let me do that and I'll bring you guys back. Alright, so I just threw some tape on here as a guide for those who are beginning. I used to do the tape so I wouldn't sand edges, but now if you pay attention to what you're doing, excuse me, you really don't need tape, but it does help. It does help. So like I said earlier, we're not going to do anything below here. There's no need. There's nothing wrong with that finish right there. Nothing over here. This is just dirt. Stuff from sitting in the garage. On the edges here, That's about how close I like to get to the edge. Okay, this is just a reference. When I'm sanding, I really don't like to sand all the way up to the tape and make it a hard edge, because that is hard to remove with the polisher. I kind of like to feather it out or kind of blend into it. So we're going to keep the 1500 with this area. We're going to keep the 2000 with this area. When we get to the 3000, we'll probably take the tape off and kind of feather it out, and so it's not such a hard edge. It's more of a transition, and that's going to polish a lot easier. If you sit here and go all the way up to the tape and go all the way up to the tape, and then when you go to buff, and when you're done buffing, you're going to see the edge where you sanded, unless you spend a lot of time polishing on the edge, which we don't want to do because the edges are thin. We don't want to burn an edge. Even though this has got plenty of clear, it's still very possible to burn the edge. That being said, we got the same 1500, like I said, squirt bottle, sandpaper, hand block. That's all you need. It's the only tools you need right there. I'm gonna sand this whole hood, 1500 grit. Probably gonna take me 30 to 45 minutes. Bring you guys back. Alright, so you guys watch me on the corner here on the front of the hood. I mean, just hit it with 1500. Pretty simple with the squirt bottle. You saw me stop. The reason I had to stop was because I heard a high-pitched squeak. When you hear a high-pitched squeak, you got to stop what you're doing, because there's something in between. There's something in between the sandpaper and the panel that's not sandpaper, and it's gonna produce straight line scratches. So you can't really have loud music. I've said that before in my videos. You kind of want to be kind of focusing on what you're doing, and listening to what's going on, so you can hear the sandpaper cut, and you know when it's something high pitch, something don't sound right, you got something in between the paper. And even though we're spray bottle and new sandpaper, I opened the door and something flew in, landed on the hood. It's really windy right now. We're about to get a tropical storm over here, so that's the wind's whipping around. Anyways, I got the panel in 1500. Like I say, it's not 100% perfect. There is a little bit left over, a little bit of residual right here. I think the 2000 will take care of that. And you can see I kind of stayed away from the tape, kind of feathered it out. We didn't get a perfect straight line up against the tape or the edges. Stayed away. Now with the 2000, we're going to have to go past the 1500, so we're going to get a little bit closer to the tape. When we get to the 3000, we're going to get a little bit closer. We'll probably take the tape off for the 3000. 3000 is really easy to polish out. You can almost do it by hand. So anyways, this is 1500 grits, looking pretty flat. The nibs are gone. When I can see, it's getting dark, so I had to bring out my light. But so what we're going to do is continue the process. 2000 grit. I got a sleeve of 50 like I showed earlier. And I mean, this stuff, we're probably going to use 2 sheets. 2 sheets for the hood. So like I say, you'll probably go 10 sheets for the entire car. Another thing to note is the sandpaper is so cheap. I think the sleeve of sandpaper was maybe $50, maybe $40 for 50 sheets. It might have went up. It probably has gone up. we're talking $1 a sheet, okay? 2 sheets, we're talking $2 to use to sand this hood. That's cheap. So don't sit with the same piece of sandpaper worn out trying to save $1. Get a new piece of sandpaper. It'll save you time. In the end, it's going to save you money. It's going to cut better. It's going to do a better job. So go through sandpaper. Be liberal with the sandpaper. Don't be stingy with the sandpaper, because it does wear out. You sit there sanding with the same piece of 1500 that eventually is going to turn into 2000. It's just going to get softer and softer and finer, and then eventually you're not even doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're trying to save money, which we're about saving money, but we're not talking about saving $1. We're talking about saving thousands of dollars. Okay? Anyways, moving on to 2000 grit, same process, spray bottle, 2000, same block. And the whole hood. Probably gonna take me about another half hour to 45 minutes. I'll bring you guys back when that's done. All right, so this third or quarter of the hood is done 2000 grit. See, it's starting to look reflective. It's getting there. Once we get to 3000, it's gonna be there. One thing I wanted to show, we have a little bit of residual peel right here, or texture, I would say. I think the 2000 is going to take care of that. One thing I wanted to show on camera that dawned on me as I was sanding was the way that I like to hold the block. Okay, so let's spray a little. I'm gonna try and do this one-handed here with the camera. Spray a little bit. We got a brand new piece of sandpaper. We used 1/2 of a sheet for that whole section. Got a brand new sheet right here. We're probably going to use 1 sheet for this half of the section, and then 1 sheet for that section, and 1 sheet for, or half of a sheet, I should say, for the last. So I kind of like to work in square feet. You really don't want to sand here and then jump around and then jump around, and then at that point you start missing stuff. So we work 1 square foot at a time, 1 square inch at a time, 2 by 2, however you want to do it. But when I'm using this block, I actually like to use the softer side, the round side, because if you think about it, it has all these edges, and those are cutting edges. So it actually cuts better with this suction side than it does the hard side. So I like to put the sandpaper all the way to the edge so that we know that wherever we put the block is the edge of the paper. Okay? If you do it like this, you're going to be sanding, and you're going to sand to here where the block is at, but look where the paper's at. The paper is past the block. So if you got rough texture or peel or whatever you want to call it, or you're getting ready to flow coat and you're doing 800, well, I wouldn't say flow coat. Let's say that you have rough texture and you want to sand, you need to sand with 800 grit to start. That's really rough. 800 grit scratch is hard to get away or hard to erase. So I like to put the paper all the way to the edge of the block, and then like that we can go, we can fine tune it. We can dial it in as far as we want to go. See, like that. Also, another way is I hold it with my thumb like this, and I use my thumb as a guide. So let's say that that's as close as we want to get to the tape. I'm feeling the tape with my thumb, or say an edge. The thumb is my barrier between the block and the edge, so I'm never going to get to the edge as long as I hold the block this way. See what I mean? It's just another little technique that I've learned, that I've kind of taught myself. Now you're in control of where the sandpaper goes. You can get, see my thumb right here? We're working it like this. We have a guide along the tape, and we're working it on the edge of the block right there. Square foot at a time. So we sand this piece right here. It's kind of hard to do. The thing's on a stand, but just a little tech tip there, the way to hold the block, man. I see some people, they don't know how to hold the block, you know, or maybe nobody showed them how to hold the block. I like it like that, right there. Sometimes it's more effective to sand like this with the block. You're getting more coverage at one time than it is to do this. I kind of switch it up, you know, whatever feels comfortable. Some Sometimes this feels more comfortable. It depends on what part of the car you're working on. Sometimes you can get more action like this. You can actually use a longer block, but I like using the small hand blocks. Let me knock out, I'm gonna go ahead and knock out the rest of this hood in 2000 grit, and I'll bring you guys back. All right, so here we are. We have the hood in 2000 grit. 2000 grit. I took the tape off. As you can see, the area we didn't sand still looks fine. One thing to note, if your clear is fresh, as in, you know, less than 2 weeks, I would use blue painter's tape. I would use this. And then possibly even wet it down before you remove it. Because the 3M stuff, the green and the yellow, could be a little bit sticky. If you didn't get good adhesion on the edge here, and you go to lift the paint, or I'm sorry, the tape, could lift paint. This is nine-month-old clear. So it's 2000 grit. We're going to continue the process with 3000 grit. I dumped out the cup, fresh water, rinsed it out, cleaned the block. Got 3000 grit soaking. At this point, if I had the system, I would be doing 3000 with a DA Trizac followed by 8000. But like most of you watching, I don't have that. So we're going to go 3000 tri-hand instead of Trizac, and do it by hand. Do it by hand. Don't cost no money. We don't need any air compressor. We don't need anything other than water, the block, and the sandpaper itself, and a towel to dry it. That's the only thing we need. So you can really, you know, fine-tune your paint job on the cheap. On the cheap without a whole lot of equipment. So anyways, enough yakking. I'm gonna start with the 3000 grit. Like I say, we need to go past the 2000 grit. But the 3000 grit buffs out, polishes out, rubs out, whatever you want to call it. Really easy. So I'm not too concerned about it. We didn't touch anything down here. I did have to, a nib right here, so I did have to hit that, but nothing right here. That finish is good. And that's the flow coat. That's the flow coating would make that look good. Anyways, 3000 grit. I'll bring you guys back. It's gonna be the same process. We're gonna use 2 sheets. Half, that's 1 sheet. Half is 2 sheets. 2 sheets of 3000 grit. Do it by hand. Bring you guys back when it's done. All right, so it's the next day here, and the hood has been sitting here in 3000 grit. Like I say, this thing was painted months ago. My recommendation, if the panel or the car is freshly painted, is I would probably wet sand it with 1500 grit or 1000 if you wanted to get it flatter, and then let it gas out. Let it sit for maybe a week or 2 before you proceed on to the next grit. That way you kind of open up the clear coat by sanding it. When you're sanding it, you can smell it. You're opening it back up, you're letting it breathe, you're letting it cure a little bit more, you're helping with the dieback or the shrinkage, and it's just practice that I use for a restoration type job. Now collision shop, you don't have time for that. Collision shop probably don't even cut and buff the whole car. But that's what I like to do. I like to do the same thing with the primers in the stages. The poly primer, I like to let it cure for, weeks. The longer the better. So this is where things can get, what's the word I'm trying to think of? There's so many different products out there to compounds and polishes to buff a car. Now, when I started, 3M is the biggest company out there. So I went with 3M compounds. And what I've learned is, or what I've experienced, I should say, was that sometimes I think the 3M compounds, after a few car washes or after being sit in the sun for a while, it seemed like maybe some scratches came back that weren't there when we finished buffing. Could be because the compounds have fillers in them that fill those scratches instead of remove the scratches. So we want to aim to remove the scratches, not fill them. We're talking about real minor stuff, but if you sit here and you stare at the car, months at a time, and you walk by it every time, you start noticing things that weren't there whenever you first buffed it. So that being said, I no longer use 3M. This is not a video to bash 3M. I use 3D ACA compounds. We'll get into that in a second here. So what we're going to do is wool pad on a DeWalt rotary polisher. Now, there's a lot of debate out there about DA polishing with the DA and all kinds of compounds, different stuff. I mean, there's so many different products out there under the sun that I would advise maybe, you know, your viewer watching at home, just pick one that works for you. I pick one that works for me. I'm not bashing any other product, but this is what works for me, and I'm happy with the results I get with these products. So 3,000 grit. So a thing to remember, the finer you sand the panel, by finer I mean the grit, you know, 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, the less you have to work the compound, the less the compound has to work. If you go up to 8,000 grit and you buff with a wool pad, it's gonna go really quick. I mean, almost without effort. If you stop at 1,500, you're gonna have to work that compound a lot longer. You could possibly heat the panel up too much. You can burn an edge. All kinds of things can go wrong, and then you're gonna be repainting. So what I like to do is take it usually to 3,000 grit and go from there with a wool pad. So let me show you the products we're gonna be using to finish out this hood. All right, so like I say, a DeWalt rotary, part number right there. And I like to use it around 14 to 1600 RPMs. Talk to some people shoot it up to 2 to 2200. I think that's a little high. I'm kind of scared of that actually, so I kind of keep it around the 1600 range. Sometimes go to 18, but 14 to 16 for me. We have the 3D Lamb's wool pad. It's a Velcro, or not Velcro, but it sticks to Velcro. This has a Velcro backing, hook and loop. This sticks to it. And with that, the 500 goes with the wool pad. Step number one. So we're going to do that first. And like I say, I have other products. I still have some 3M stuff that I never use. I also like this Sonax Cut Max. This is good stuff. This is made overseas, of Germany, I think. And then I do like the Menzerna. I have tried the Meguiar's M100. Meh. It works, but not as good as what I've discovered with the 3D ACA. So the pad is a little bit dirty, so I'm going to try and get the dust off of this. You can spray with a little bit of water and dampen it up, but we're not trying to soak the pad or the panel. So we're going to do a wool pad first with the ACA 500 extra cut. That's what we're going to do. We're going to start out with 1400 RPM. What's important is good lighting. Usually I would like to do this in the room that I paint in, where we got a lot of light, but got a car sitting in there right now, so we're going to have to do with what we got here. Whenever you're doing anything like that in the paint room, you want to make sure the products you're using don't contain silicone. If they have silicone, you're going to have a nightmare next time you paint another car in there. Anyways, let me get this thing set up. I'm going to show you how many drops that we put and the process of that. All right, that's about as much compound as I like to put. It's about a drop every 4 to 6 square inches or so. You don't need to put a whole lot of compound. You don't need to be slinging it all over the place. A little bit goes a long way. I also put a little bit on the pad. They call it priming the pad. It's already primed, but I added a little bit more. The key thing here is you want to try and you want to stay away from the edges if at all possible. When you're buffing, the pad is going to rotate clockwise. You want to rotate off of the edge of the panel. You don't want to be trying to dig into the panel because you're going to burn the edge. Okay? And you want to try and keep the pad flat as possible. Now understand, in some areas right here you're going to have to tilt the pad to get in there, but for a big surface like this, or especially in the middle, keep the pad flat. I'm not going to be pressing on the pad or the machine very much. I'm going to let the weight of the machine do the work. the machine, the buffer is pretty heavy, and the weight of itself is gonna put pressure on the panel. We're gonna let the weight of the machine do the work. All we're gonna do is work it back and forth. Right, so you guys just watched me do that real quick. Didn't take long. We don't really hang out on the edges too much. You can see I was kind of going real light in this area right here because we have two edges right there plus a point. We don't want to hang up on it or anything like that. So what I do, I would call that done with the wool pad. What I do next is I do the same compound with a white foam pad. This is it could be considered an unnecessary step by most, but I like to do it with the same compound because the foam pad, I feel like you have better control of it. You can get right up on the edge, and you're going to see that right now when I do this. You can get right up on here. So, same compound, foam pad, same process. Alright, so that's what you saw right there with the foam pad. Probably looks the same on camera. I just do it as an insurance step. Same process. You saw how much weight I had on the machine, literally none. We didn't sling a bunch of compound anywhere. We didn't make a big mess. Now we're going to proceed to the rest of the hood. I'm going to do the same process for the rest off camera. I'm going to bring you guys back and show you the polishing stage. Alright, so starting to rain. It might be kind of loud, but I got the entire thing in the in the foam pad with the 3D ACA 500, so we could put the foam pad, the wool pad, and the 500 away. The next important step is you want to clean the panel. You got to clean all that residue off. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little bit of a haze on it. It's just compound residue. You got to clean all that off before you move on to the polishing stage. So what I like to use is wax and grease remover. You can use soap and water, or you can use spray away glass cleaner. Either way, all that needs to come off, or else that's going to contaminate the next polishing pad. So same stuff we use whenever we're getting ready to spray anything: wax and grease remover in a spray bottle, microfiber cloth. We're going to hose it on. And we're just going to wipe it off. Like I say, you can use soap and water. If you want to do soap and water, I would use Dawn dish soap only. I wouldn't use anything with fragrance. I wouldn't use anything moisturizing, because what you want to do is you want to degrease. You want to take all that stuff off, all the residue off. And this is gonna show you what you left behind. If you missed any scratches, if you need to hit another area before you move on to the next step. Now, this green color is very forgiving, so I'm not too worried about scratches, honestly. Now, if it was black, I'd be doing it in a better lighting situation. I'd have more lights so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Now, like I say, on camera, this probably doesn't look any different than when we first started, but it's definitely flatter and all the nibs are gone. So now I'm going to move on to the polishing stage. We're going to be using the 3D ACA 520 on a black pad. Same speed, same everything. This is going to go a lot quicker because we don't have to remove scratches. All we're now we're doing is removing whatever maybe swirl marks are left. So real easy. Just going to finesse it out. Right, another tool I wanted to show is this Milwaukee mini polisher. I really like this thing. It came in this carrying case, came with a battery, and I don't know that it came with the pad. I think it came with one pad. Well, that's a 3M. I think it came with maybe this one, wool pad, and then you can buy these 3M pads, which are the same corresponding pad as the big one. So this is real good if you're nervous about the edges. This you can get, it means basically a drill. You can get right up on the edge. A minute ago I realized I missed some scratches here, so I went with the mini, cleaned it up real quick. Really all that's left is I'm gonna hit this thing with some old school butter wax. I don't know if anybody remembers this stuff. I still like it. It smells good, and it's just, I like it. I like using it. It's kind of a ritual of mine. So I'm gonna hit it with some butter wax right now. I'm gonna put the hood lip on. I'm gonna put the Chevrolet letters on, and I'll bring you guys back and show you the finished product. All right, here we are. Here's the finished product. Still kind of gloomy outside. I really don't want to put it out there in the sun or in the clouds for natural light. But overall, I think it looks pretty good. Let me know what you guys in the comments think. It does have some imperfections, trust me, I know where they're at, because I did everything to this hood. But considering that this was painted in a garage, the hood lip has been chromed and we got brand new Chevrolet letters. So using these products that I just showed you, you can achieve this same exact result. Practice makes perfect. I really like the 3D ACA compounds. I'm sure there's others that are equivalent, you know, everybody has their preference, but I really like the 3D. I feel in combination with 3000 grit, this is the result. And you don't have to sit and buff for very long at all. The main key takeaway is you want to do it in a clean environment, you want to do it well lit, and you want to take your time. And you really want to sand every, you know, square foot at a time. When you go to buff, you want to do a square foot at a time. You don't want to be jumping around. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And this thing is ready to go on. Still got to do the fenders and the doors. So I'm going to be doing a video on that, but it's going to be the same process. Same process. And then after that, I think the car is, as far as paint work, the car is done. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Y'all stay tuned for more work. Thanks for watching.